I want you to imagine something with me. Close your eyes for a moment. You're not scrolling through your phone, not sitting at your desk. You're somewhere else, somewhere dusty. The air smells like old secrets and forgotten pages, a scent that's both comforting and slightly unnerving. You're in a library, maybe, or a used bookstore, one of those places where time itself seems to slow down and breathe. You walk down an aisle you've never noticed before. The spines of the books are faded, worn smooth by countless hands, and the passage of years. They whisper to you stories of things you never knew existed. And then you see it. A title that doesn't just sit on a shelf. It jumps out at you. It vibrates with a bizarre energy. The title reads, When Dodos Debated Dinosaurs, the Extinct Animal Election. You stop. You stare. It's an image that instantly takes hold of your imagination. You can practically see it, can't you? The grand debate hall, maybe with a half-eaten lectern in the middle. The dodo, perhaps, looking a bit like a sad, flightless pigeon, in a tiny, ill-fitting tie, is standing at a microphone. And across the way, a Tyrannosaurus rex, not roaring but clearing its throat with a puff of dust that smells faintly of crushed dreams and Mesozoic regret. The debate is on. The subject which animals' extinction holds the greater narrative power. The election. A cosmic vote to decide which species best represents humanity's relationship with the planet. It's a title that's not just a book, it's a question. It's a fable. It's a brilliant, fantastical premise. A premise, by the way, that is completely, beautifully, and utterly fabricated. The book doesn't actually exist. Not by that name, anyway. You turn it over in your hands, the light from a nearby window glinting off the faded cover, and you read the real title, Dinosaurs to Dodos, an encyclopedia of extinct animals. You feel a little pop of air go out of the balloon of your imagination. The grand debate hall, the tiny ties, the dramatic, whispered voice of the narrator in your head, they all vanish in a puff of mundane reality. It's just an encyclopedia. For kids. Published in 1999, a hardcover 112 pages. But here's the secret, the thing that brings the mystery rushing back in. The original title you came up with isn't an accident. It's the perfect description of what this book and the two creatures that bracket its title actually represent. This book is a battleground. It is the very stage for an invisible, ongoing contest for symbolic supremacy. It's the moment when the dodo and the dinosaur were finally forced to face each other in the ring of our collective consciousness, each with a different story to tell. So let's open it, shall we? You can almost feel the weight of 4 billion years of history inside its pages as you flip past the table of contents. 4. The book is a journey, an easy-to-follow guide through the geologic time scale, starting not with big flashy monsters, but with the first microscopic sea creatures, and working its way forward to more recent losses, like the Tasmanian wolf. It's a compendium of vanished life from the Precambrian period all the way to a little under 30 years ago. Each of its 12 chapters is a time capsule, meticulously organized by geologic periods and epochs, with dazzling full-color illustrations that seem to leap from the page. You can almost smell the primeval swamp, hear the rustle of ancient ferns as you turn the pages. It's a portal, a vehicle designed to transport middle readers, kids, between the ages of 6 and 12 into the deep, often unsettling history of our planet. And who built this portal? The answer lies in the brilliant synergy of its two creators, an author named Don Lessem and an illustrator named John Sovak. They're the ones who set up the election, who prepared the candidates for the great debate. And trust me, these guys are far from your average academics. Don Lessem, often called Dino Don in his professional life, is a master popularizer of science. Think of him as the friendly, slightly sarcastic host of this whole spectacle. He started his career as a science journalist, writing for prestigious publications like the Boston Globe and the New York Times for over a decade. But his real passion was dinosaurs, a focus that took hold while he was a journalism fellow at MIT in 1988. He's the kind of guy who doesn't just write about science, he lives it. He founded dinosaur charities advised on the movies, Jurassic Park, and Dinosaur, and even has a sauropodomorph, dinosaur Lesomsaurus, named in his honor. Bon, imagine being so good at talking about dinosaurs that they literally name a dinosaur after you. It's the paleontologist's equivalent of having a sandwich named after you at a deli in New York. Lesom is the guy who created the world's largest anatomically correct dinosaur sculpture for an exhibition, a massive Argentinosaurus that was 120 feet long. This is a man who thinks big. He is also reportedly designing a mobile Trump Museum of Crime to tour U.S. cities. A little weird, absolutely. But it tells you everything you need to know about his personality. He's an expert in his field, but he's never afraid to step into the bizarre, the controversial, or the plain unexpected. And then there is Jan Sovak, the book's illustrator. If Lesom is the voice, Sovak is the eye. He's an award-winning nature artist whose work is so praised that reviewers describe his illustrations as brilliantly executed and able to breathe life and movement into creatures that have been dead for millions of years. He works from fossils and the latest scientific theories, but his true genius is in translating cold, hard bone into warm, breathing reality. And here's a funny little piece of pop culture trivia. Sovak also illustrated a version of Michael Crichton's original Jurassic Park novel. So you see, the metaphorical election between the dodo and the dinosaur was essentially organized by two guys who were already deeply embedded in the pop culture dinosaur machine. It was almost a family affair. Now, as you look at this book, holding it there in your hands, you might find an interesting little quirk. The book is listed on some retail sites as an item in the Jurassic Park series. Historians still argue whether this categorization was an intentional official part of the franchise or a clever marketing ploy by booksellers. 10. The latter seems far more likely, of course, a little wink to the consumer, a way to say, hey, if you love those blockbuster dinosaurs, you'll love these too. It's a testament to the commercial power of the dinosaur, a power we'll get into a little later. But for now, you just need to know that this encyclopedia, this unassuming little guide for children, is the intellectual stage. It's where the dodo and the dinosaur, two of the most potent symbols of extinction, were forced to stand side by side. And so the election begins. In this ongoing, timeless contest, each creature has its own platform, its own message to deliver. The dodo, with its mournful, misunderstood eyes, stands for human culpability. Its campaign slogan is a simple, heavy truth. We are to blame. The dinosaur in all its terrible grand majesty offers a humbling counterargument. Its platform is cosmic indifference. Some things are just bigger than you. One story is a morality play, a fable about our recent past. The other is an epic tragedy, a reminder of deep time and impersonal planetary forces. The book you hold is the ballot box, and the following sections are the campaign speeches. It's up to you to decide who has the more powerful message, who truly wins the extinct animal election. But first, you'll have to hear their arguments. We begin naturally with the most famously maligned loser in all of animal history, the dodo. Let's be honest. When you think of an extinct animal, your mind almost instantly goes to one of two creatures. There's the big bad one, the one that's been the star of 1,000 movies, the king of the old world. But then there's the other one, the one that's become a punchline, the one whose name is synonymous with being a total hopeless loser. You know it. It's the dodo, the poor flightless bird with the comical potbelly and the vacant stare. The one that the world decided with a collective shrug was just too stupid to live, and that my friend is the first great act of this strange, sad play. The story you learned in cartoons, the one you picked up in passing, goes something like this. Once upon a time, on the remote island of Mauritius, there lived a bird so magnificently unprepared for life that when humans showed up, it just didn't get it. It was too fat to fly, too slow to run, and apparently too dim-witted to be afraid of a bunch of hairy, axe-wielding mammals showing up on its pristine beach. It just stood there blinking, probably wondering if these new arrivals had brought snacks, and then poof, gone. Vanished forever in the blink of a historical eye. It's a convenient, almost cozy narrative, isn't it? The dodo was an evolutionary fail, a cosmic joke, and its disappearance was just a matter of time. A tragic but understandable conclusion. Like a fax machine in the age of email. But you know there's always more to the story. And the real truth is a lot more complex and a lot more human. You see, the dodo's extinction was incredibly fast. The first recorded sighting of this bird was by Dutch sailors in 1598. The last widely accepted sighting, a mere 64 years later, in 1662. That is a terrifyingly short window of time for a species to go from being a living, breathing part of an ecosystem to a ghost of itself in a little over half a century. It shocked early observers. It was a completely new concept. Before this, no one had really thought it was possible for humans to have such a devastating influence on a species. Think about that for a second. The idea that a single species, ois, could just make another species vanish from the face of the earth hadn't even occurred to people. It hadn't been thought possible. And when it happened, a little panic set in. This new power was well unnerving. And so a narrative had to be created, a justification, a psychological defense mechanism for a burgeoning global superpower. And that's where the stupid dodo myth came from. Because in a time when many believed that God would not create a species that could simply vanish, the easiest, most psychologically soothing explanation was that the dodo was just faulty, a design flaw. A clumsy, slightly stupid bird that simply wasn't fit for this brave new world. It's a lot easier to mourn a species that was too dumb to live than to face the cold, hard reality that it was a creature of elegant specialization, perfectly adapted to its home that was brutally and swiftly driven to oblivion by a combination of human action and carelessness. It's the ultimate intellectual absolution, a way of shifting blame from human-driven environmental recklessness to a supposed pre-existing evolutionary failing of the animal itself. It's one of the great historical gaslights of all time. We told the dodo was stupid, and for centuries we all believed it. What actually happened to the dodo, it wasn't a single act of malice. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Yes, some sailors hunted them, but they were reportedly not very good eating. The real culprits were the creatures that came with them. Those pesky, opportunistic stowaways on every ship, the ones that breed, like it's a competitive sport, rats, and also pigs, dogs, and monkeys. These newly arrived invasive species released into a delicate ecosystem with no natural predators made short work of the dodo's eggs and hatchlings which they had been laying on the ground for millions of years without a care in the world. On top of that, the beautiful Mauritian forest, the dodo's only home, was being cleared for human settlements which made it far less adapted to its own environment. The dodo was a victim of its own success, a creature so perfectly suited to its unique, predator-free island life that it had no way to defend itself against the chaos of the modern world. It was the biological equivalent of a person who is amazing at chess, but has never heard of a car. You can see how that story ends, right? And what did the dodo even look like? What was it? For centuries, this was a matter of fierce debate. With so few specimens and so many strange, often wildly exaggerated, written accounts from early navigators, scientists had a nightmare on their hands. For a long time, it was a scholarly debate whether the dodo was a type of ostrich, a rail, a vulture, or some other entirely unique kind of bird. It wasn't until the mid-1800s when a Danish zoologist made a careful comparison of a skull he had found that a conclusion was finally reached. The dodo, it turned out, was a large, flightless ground pigeon. A pigeon. Think about that for a second. The most mocked and maligned extinct creature in all of history was, in fact, a magnificent specialized member of the pigeon family. This revelation pulled the dodo from the realm of mythological beasts and grounded it firmly back in biological history. You see, the dodo's entire life was one big, glorious contradiction. It was a plump, flightless pigeon, a stupid animal that was actually an incredibly fast and agile creature with a powerful tendon in its leg, a feature we see in quick-footed birds today. Its story, from start to tragic end, is a cautionary tale about how we as humans choose to tell stories about the world. It's a story we had to tell ourselves to sleep at night. But now that you know the truth, you can't look at that cartoon dodo the same way. The dodo's story is about us, our responsibility, our hubris, and the devastating, almost unnoticed impact we have on everything around us. It is the perfect candidate for the first part of this debate, the candidate that represents human-caused tragedy. But we're not done with the dodo yet. The story only gets more interesting. So you put down the book. You've walked away from that little mystery in the dusty bookstore, and you've just learned that the dodo, the ultimate cosmic punchline, was driven to extinction by human-caused chaos, not its own dim-wittedness. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It's one thing to laugh at a cartoon bird who can't get out of his own way, and another entirely to see that the real tragedy was on a global scale. It makes you feel, well, a little guilty. You want to believe in the clumsy, stumbling buffoon. It's easier. It absolves us of responsibility. It's just like that old joke. Why did the dodo cross the road? Because it was a highly specialized ground-dwelling animal completely unprepared for the sudden appearance of a large metal object traveling at great speed, operated by a species that was inadvertently destroying its native habitat. Get it? It's not funny because it's not supposed to be. But now we're going to peel back another layer of this onion of sadness. You know the dodo wasn't stupid. But what was it actually? What did it look like in real life? The answer will probably surprise you because the modern scientific narrative has worked tirelessly to get justice for this bird, to rescue it from the endless shame of being the world's most famous evolutionary flop. Forget the paintings, the silly stories, the caricatures. Let's imagine what it was really like. We've learned that the dodo wasn't a dumpy, ungainly bird, but what was it? Think of an animal that is perfectly, beautifully adapted to its environment. Its native island of Mauritius was a paradise with no natural predators. For millions of years, the dodo lived a life of peaceful ground dwelling. This meant it didn't need to be able to fly. It didn't need to be afraid. Its whole physical being was specialized for this one place on Earth. And that specialization made it elegant, not stupid. Anatomical studies of its skeletal remains have shown that the dodo possessed a tendon in its leg that was almost as thick as the bone itself. This is a feature you see in fast, agile birds today, the kind that can make a sudden darting motion and change direction in an instant. So no, it wasn't a fat, slow-moving bird that you could just walk up to and poke. Early written accounts of live dodos described them as fast-moving creatures that loved the forest and were perfectly at home in their beautiful habitat. It was a specialist, not a generalist. It was a ninja, not a potato. You just happened to show up in an environment where it didn't need its ninja skills anymore. For hundreds of years, scientists debated what on earth this thing even was. With so few specimens brought back to Europe and with so many wildly exaggerated tales from sailors who had just spent 6 months at sea and were possibly just a little bit tipsy. When they wrote down their observations, the dodo's taxonomy was a complete mess. Early scientists proposed that it was a type of ostrich or maybe a rail or even a vulture. Imagine that for a second. The poor dodo caught in a scientific identity crisis. No, I'm not a vulture. Do I look like I eat carrion? My dignity is a little bruised, thank you very much. It was a mess, and the whole thing made the dodo feel less like a real creature and more like a mythological beast that someone just happened to invent for a bedtime story. But then in the mid-19th century, a breakthrough. A couple of scientists, Johannes Theodor Reinhardt and Hugh Edwin Strickland, decided to get serious about it. They meticulously compared a dodo skull with other remains, and after a long and careful process, they finally had an answer. And what they discovered must have dropped more than a few monocles. The dodo, it turns out, was a very large, flightless ground pigeon. Yes, a pigeon. Your mind probably just flashed to one of the little gray birds pecking at scraps outside a fast food restaurant. But this was no ordinary pigeon. This was the heavyweight champion of the pigeon world, the kind of pigeon that would have its own fan club and its own line of merchandise. The kind of pigeon that would be a motivational speaker. It was a magnificent creature, an evolutionary success story, until it wasn't. The fact that the most famous symbol of extinction is actually just a big, spectacular pigeon is one of those wonderfully quirky tidbits that makes the study of science so delightfully strange. And the story doesn't end there. In the 21st century, the dodo has found a new purpose. Its tragic tale has been reignited, not as a symbol of mockery, but as a symbol of possibility. In 2016, a team of geneticists successfully sequenced the dodo's genome. Think about that for a second. We now have a biological blueprint for a creature that hasn't walked the earth in over 360 years. This has led to something even wilder than a debate with a dinosaur, a very serious, very public, and very ethical debate about de-extinction. Scientists are now asking if we have the right to bring a species back from the dead, and if so, should we spend billions of dollars trying to reverse a mistake we made centuries ago? What would a dodo eat? Would it remember it's a pigeon, and would it still have a fear of clowns and small dogs? Or is that just a pigeon thing? These are the kinds of questions that the dodo, the bird once thought too stupid to live, is now making us ask ourselves. The dodo is no longer just a ghost. It's an active, living force in the conversation about conservation, about our future, and about our past mistakes. Its story has transformed from a simple, tragic fable into a complex, multi-layered, scientific and ethical dilemma. It's not a joke. It's a mirror. And it's ready to present its case in the great extinct animal election. You got that sinking feeling now, haven't you? That feeling of historical injustice. The dodo wasn't stupid. The dodo wasn't a joke. It was a victim of its own perfection. A specialist in a world that suddenly, violently, no longer valued its skills. Its extinction wasn't a punchline, it was a premonition, a warning we completely failed to understand at the time. You're now looking at the dodo not as a figure of mockery, but as a ghost haunting our modern conscience, an emblem of humanity's environmental recklessness. But here's the thing. That's not where its story ends. The dodo's narrative, like the ghost of a good friend, has come back to teach us one more thing. For centuries, the dodo was the ultimate cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when we're at our most environmentally careless. It was an object lesson in obsolescence, a story about a creature that was a little too slow to keep up with human progress. But then something amazing happened, something that sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie. In 2016, a team of geneticists did the unthinkable. They successfully sequenced the dodo's genome. Let that sink in for a minute. For a creature that hasn't walked the earth in over 360 years, we now have a biological blueprint, an instruction manual for what it was right down to its genetic code. It's not a full, complete, perfect copy, of course. Scholars still debate whether the moral obligation to reverse a human-caused extinction outweighs the ethical and ecological risks of bringing a species back from the dead. It's a deeply complex issue, one that has more layers than a lasagna at an Italian wedding. But the fact remains we have the code. This is a scientific feat that pulls the dodo from the realm of the historical and thrusts it with a gentle and confused thud right into the center of a very modern debate. You see, the dodo is now a symbol of possibility. It's no longer just a ghost from the past. It's a living question mark about the future. The conversation has gone from what did we do to what can we do? The concept of de-extinction, of using advanced genetics to bring a species back from the dead, has always felt like a fun, nerdy fantasy, something you'd see in a movie about an island theme park that goes horribly wrong. But with the dodo, it became very, very real. The technology is getting closer, and we now have a clear, distinct roadmap. The dodo has become a test case, a grand global philosophical experiment. Imagine that. The dodo, a creature once thought too stupid to live, is now the star of a profound ethical discussion about humanity's role as a biological force. It's the ultimate glow-up. It's like the quiet kid who got a bad haircut in middle school suddenly becomes a celebrated supermodel appearing on the cover of Philosophical Quarterly. The question of de-extinction is not a simple one. If you can bring back the dodo, what about the passenger pigeon or the Tasmanian tiger? Do we have the right to play God? And if we do, where would you even put a dodo? The island of Mauritius, its native home, has changed completely. Would it survive? Would it be a new kind of zoo animal, a living museum piece, or would it just be dropped off and told to figure it out? And what about the invasive species like rats that were part of the reason it went extinct in the first place? Do you send the dodo back into the same environment that was a death sentence for its ancestors? It's a deeply complicated problem. It makes a Rubik's Cube look like a single monochromatic square. This entire discussion, fueled by a sequenced genome and a growing sense of human responsibility, shows us something vital. The dodo's story is not a one-note song of tragedy. It is a symphony of human hubris, biological specialization, and now technological and ethical possibility. It's a story about a creature that died for our sins and one that may now come back because of our science. It's no longer the dodo's debate, it's our debate. Its extinction serves as a warning, and its potential return serves as a test of whether we've learned anything in the last few hundred years. This is the dodo's ultimate argument in the extinct animal election. It presents a clear, direct case for human responsibility, for the moral weight of our actions, and for the possibility of a future we could have never imagined. This is the end of the Dodos campaign. A fascinating, tragic, and strangely hopeful tale. But now, as you close the book on this chapter, you turn the page and you see the next candidate for the title of Most Iconic Extinct Animal. This one doesn't have a tragic story of human folly. Its story is far, far older, and it's a tale of unimaginable power and cosmic-scale destruction. We're moving from a recent human-caused extinction to one that happened long before we ever walked the Earth. We're moving from a flightless pigeon to well, you know what's coming next. We're talking about the terrible reptiles. We're talking about the dinosaurs. You're holding that book, and as you turn the page, the air in the room changes. It goes from smelling like old paper and forgotten sorrow to something far older. Something cold and vast like a planet's memory. The Dodo story was a little fable, a morality play confined to a tiny island in the Indian Ocean. A story about a few sailors and a few rats, and the quiet, tragic consequences of human arrival. It was a story you could hold in your hand, a small and intimate heartbreak. But the moment you turn that page to the section on dinosaurs, the scale of things just explodes. You've gone from a gentle, sleepy ASMR of rustling leaves and quiet footfalls to the seismic thunder of something truly immense. You've left the realm of human-caused tragedy and entered the domain of cosmic inevitability. The Dodo's extinction makes you feel a little bit guilty, a little bit sad for what we've done. The dinosaur's extinction, however, doesn't make you feel anything at all. It just makes you feel small. Infinitesimally small. It's a completely different kind of debate. One candidate is a quiet, feathered symbol of human hubris. The other is an epic, scaly testament to the grand, impersonal forces of a universe that doesn't really care about your feelings. You went from a conversation about the last 400 years to a story about a reign that lasted for 165 million. A span of time so vast that it makes the entire history of humanity feel like a particularly long coffee break. The dinosaur's opening argument in this great election isn't a complex narrative about its own evolutionary failings. It doesn't have one. Its argument is a simple, brutal display of power. It's the sheer weight of a 180-foot-long sauropod, the terrifying grace of a tyrannosaur's charge, the armored elegance of a triceratops's horns. Their story is a lesson in deep time. They were the dominant life forms on this planet for so long that their entire reign saw continents drift, oceans form, and mountain ranges rise and fall like waves. Think about that. They saw things you can't even dream of. They were the main event for longer than our kind has even existed. I mean, if you put all the years of human history, from the first cave painting to your mom's last text message on a timeline with the Mesozoic era, you'd need a magnifying glass to find us. It's just humbling. It's a beautiful, terrifying thought. And here's a little quirky tidbit for you. Even within this grand epic story, there are these tiny, nerdy debates. Paleontologists still debate whether sauropods, those long-necked, long-tailed giants, held their necks high in the air like a giraffe or carried them out in front of their bodies more like a swan. It might seem like a fringe topic, a purely academic argument, but the answer changes everything we know about their biology, their behavior, and even how they ate. A higher neck would mean they were browsers reaching for high leaves. A lower neck would mean they were grazers chomping on ferns and grasses. A small point, maybe, but it completely changes the mental image you have of a 60-ton animal just going about its day. It's a reminder that even at this cosmic scale, the scientific process is a messy, human, and wonderfully debatable thing. The dinosaurs' extinction, the big final act of their dynasty, was not caused by a rival species or by some internal evolutionary weakness. It was a cosmic punch to the face. The leading theory, of course, is that a massive asteroid, roughly 6 miles wide, came screaming in from the blackness of space and slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. It was a planet-killing event. It caused a global winter, plunged the world into darkness, and effectively reset the clock on life itself. Their story isn't a cautionary tale about what happens when you're not careful. It's a humbling, sobering reminder of what happens when the universe decides it's time for a change. It's an extinction that is completely, beautifully, and terrifyingly out of our hands. The Dodos narrative, remember, is about human accountability. The Dinosaurs is about our cosmic insignificance. The Dodo's story is about a closed-off, limited world, an island. The Dinosaur's story is about the entire vast, open world itself. You've now seen both sides of the coin. You felt the sad, quiet ghost of the Dodo and the humbling, titanic ghost of the Dinosaur. The election is in full swing, and both candidates have presented their opening arguments. But before we can get to the final vote, we need to know where these magnificent creatures even came from. Not evolutionarily, of course, but as a concept, as a word. Because the man who gave the dinosaur its name was almost as controversial as the beasts themselves. A man who was an outspoken critic of Charles Darwin and a brilliant, complicated figure in his own right. So let's go back in time. Not to the Cretaceous, but to 19th century England. The air isn't dusty and primeval anymore. It smells like coal smoke and old leather books, and we're about to meet the man who first told the world about the terrible reptiles. You've just left the Dodo standing on its soapbox, a magnificent pigeon, pleading its case for human accountability and a cautionary tale of environmental folly. The air is still a lingering scent of dust and ancient, unspoken shame. But as you turn that page in the book, the mood shifts. The silence is broken by a distant, thunderous sound, a rumble that began over a century ago. You're no longer on a quiet, tragic island. You've just landed in Victorian England. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke, of leather-bound books, and the smug, intellectual certainty of men with sideburns and stern expressions. And you're about to meet one of them. The man who named the terrible lizards. The one who perhaps unknowingly set the stage for our entire modern obsession. His name is Sir Richard Owen. Look at him. He's not a friendly modern-day Dino Don in a safari vest. He's a figure from a different era, a comparative anatomist and a paleontologist with a sharp eye and an even sharper tongue. He's the kind of guy who, if he walked into a modern-day pub, would probably correct everyone's grammar and then demand to see the landlord's spine. He's the undisputed king of his scientific hill, an intellectual heavyweight who has a talent for interpreting the world's most baffling fossils. But here's the thing about Owen. He was a brilliant man, sure, but he was also a bit of a controversial figure. A man with a penchant for intellectual feuds and a reputation for taking credit for other people's work. In a way, you could say he was the real terrible reptile of his social circles. Now rewind to the mid-1800s. People have been unearthing giant, bizarre bones for decades. They're finding enormous teeth and massive thigh bones all scattered in the rock like pieces from a forgotten board game. They know they're from something big, something unlike anything alive today. But they don't know what. The bones are just a jumble of fascinating curiosities. The fossil hunters of the day would bring their finds to the great institutions of England, and the academics would scratch their chins, debate for a while, and then file the bones away as a kind of evolutionary footnote. It was chaos. There was no thread connecting them, no grand theory. And then Owen shows up. He looks at a handful of these bones and sees what no one else has. He sees a pattern. He sees a unified, distinct group of animals. And in 1842, he gives them a name. He calls them Dinosauria. The word itself is a masterful piece of science communication. It's beautiful, brutal, and simple. It comes from two Greek words, Deinos and Sauros. Deinos meaning terrible, powerful, or fearfully great, and Sauros meaning lizard or reptile. Think about that for a second. It's not just big lizard or weird lizard, it's terrible reptile, or more poetically, fearfully great reptile. It's a name that conjures a feeling of awe, of power, of ancient, overwhelming might. A name that says, what you are looking at is not just a bunch of old bones. It is the ghost of a world-ending monarch, and you should be terrified and in awe. It was in its own way a stroke of public relations genius. It gave these creatures an identity. It turned them from a collection of strange fossils into a unified, terrifying, and endlessly compelling subject of study. It was the moment the dinosaur as a concept was truly born in the human imagination. But the coining of the term was not a peaceful, quiet moment in history. The intellectual context of the time was a battlefield, and Owen was a general. At this same time, Charles Darwin was developing his own theory, one that would rock the scientific world to its very core. A theory of evolution by natural selection. And here is where we get to the core of this intellectual debate. Owen was an outspoken critic of Darwin's work. He wasn't a creationist in the modern sense. He agreed that evolution occurred, that species changed over time. But he fundamentally disagreed with the idea of natural selection as the sole driving force behind it. Owen thought evolution was far more complex than Darwin's elegant, but perhaps too simple theory. He believed it was a more layered, more intricate process than what Darwin had laid out in his book. It was an intellectual rivalry, and Owen being Owen wasn't shy about it. This is where the scholarly debate comes in. Historians still argue whether Owen's criticisms of Darwin were driven by a genuine scientific disagreement or by a personal rivalry and a desire to be the biggest name in British science. And honestly, it was probably a little of both. There was a lot of ego flying around at the time. Owen was a prominent man. He was given a cottage in Richmond Park by the royal family and was put on the civil list by the Prime Minister Robert Peel. He had the full weight of the establishment behind him, and Darwin's ideas were, to put it mildly, a bit of a threat to the status quo. The creation of the dinosaur as a distinct taxonomic group was therefore not a singular, objective scientific act. It was embedded in a period of intense intellectual rivalry and philosophical conflict. It's a wonderfully weird tidbit that the man who gave the dinosaur its name was locked in a bitter intellectual showdown with the man who gave us the central theory of all modern biology. It's like finding out that the guy who invented the hot dog was allergic to mustard. It's just perfect. Owen's work, for all his personal flaws, was transformative. He took these bones from the ground, a scapula here, a tooth there, a section of a femur from some other place, and through sheer intellectual force, he created a whole new world. He put the pieces together in a way that had never been done before, and he gave that world a name that would echo through the ages. His classification didn't just organize the fossils, it created a new kind of mythology. He turned scattered curiosities into a unified group of terrible reptiles, and by doing so, he laid the very foundation for what the public would come to see and love about these creatures. All of our modern understanding, all of the blockbuster movies and children's books and museum exhibitions began in that moment in the mid-19th century, when one man, a brilliant, complicated, and deeply controversial man, gave a voice to the silent, scattered bones of a forgotten dynasty. And that voice, once it was given, could not be silenced. It was the first and most crucial step in the Dinosaurs campaign to win the extinct animal election. The dinosaur's power, unlike the Dodos, was not based on its demise, but on its very being. But it was only the beginning. The next step, the one that truly cemented the dinosaur's place in our hearts and minds, would be a renaissance, a rebirth, a complete and utter revolution in how we saw them. You've just left Sir Richard Owen standing in his Victorian office, surrounded by the weighty intellectual gravity of the 19th century. He was a brilliant man, a bit of a grouch, and the one who gave the world the word Dinosauria. He created a powerful, compelling, and utterly terrifying image of these creatures as terrible reptiles. And for over a century, that's exactly what they were in our collective imagination. We pictured them as giant, sluggish, cold-blooded lizards lumbering through swamps and just generally being slow and miserable. They were portrayed in movies as dragging their tails, moving with all the grace of a dump truck in reverse. The old museum dioramas showed them as dull gray and green beasts stuck in a world that was as boring as they were. This was the conventional wisdom, the accepted truth that everyone just believed. But then in the 1960s, something happened. A seismic shift in the world of paleontology. It was an intellectual earthquake that we now call the dinosaur renaissance. It wasn't one single person, but a collective revolution, a moment where a new generation of scientists looked at the old bones and saw something completely different. They didn't see sluggish, brain-dead reptiles. They saw active, intelligent, warm-blooded animals. And this new perspective changed everything. It's like you'd been looking at a black and white photograph your whole life, and then suddenly someone gave you a pair of glasses that let you see it in full, vibrant color. The change began with a simple yet groundbreaking idea. Maybe dinosaurs weren't reptiles at all. Maybe they were more like us, or at the very least more like the animals we see today. They were no longer seen as slow, tail-dragging brutes. The new picture that began to emerge was of a dynamic, energetic creature, one that was fast, agile, and possibly even social. The old image of dinosaurs as just big, dumb lizards was out. The new image of dinosaurs as complex and, in some cases, feathered beings was in. It was a complete makeover. The Tyrannosaurus rex went from being a slow-moving, tail-dragging monster to a fleet-footed predator, a truly terrifying force of nature. It was like finding out that the guy who drives a beat-up Ford Pinto is actually a Formula One driver in his spare time. It just completely changes your perception. And that brings us to the most mind-bending part of this entire story, the one that will make you look at every bird in your backyard with a completely different perspective. The modern scientific consensus, the one that is now firmly embedded within the modern view of what dinosaurs are, is that birds didn't just share a common ancestor with dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. They are the direct living descendants of a specific group of theropod dinosaurs. Think about that for a second. The tiny sparrow sitting on your windowsill, a living, breathing, feathered dinosaur. The pigeon you yelled at for trying to steal your fries, also a dinosaur. It's the ultimate punchline that isn't a joke. It's the single most revolutionary idea to come out of the dinosaur renaissance, and it completely reframes how we think about life, evolution, and extinction. It's the ultimate survival story. But just like with anything in science, this consensus is not without its detractors. This is where we get to the scholarly debate. You see, while most paleontologists today fully embrace the birds are dinosaurs paradigm, some still don't. The research mentions a prominent paleontologist named Alan Fiducia, who argues that birds could not have evolved from the theropod dinosaurs. He says that theropods were too specialized for terrestrial ground-based life, and that flight feathers and birds could only have evolved from a creature that lived in the trees. He's the guy who looked at the black and white photo, got the new glasses, and said, "Nope, those colors are wrong. They don't make sense." He has gone so far as to accuse the modern consensus of being theory-laden and driven by a quest for popularity. He argues that the desire to connect dinosaurs to something as cool and modern as a bird has led to an extreme form of confirmation bias, where scientists are just trying to make the conclusions fit a pre-established theory. And honestly, you have to appreciate the scholarly drama of it all. It's like a TV show, but with more beards and tweed jackets. This is a beautiful example of how science isn't just a list of facts you have to memorize. It's a messy human process filled with debates, rivalries, and deeply held beliefs. Historians still argue whether Fiducia's critiques are a genuine, well-argued scientific rebuttal or simply the last gasp of a dying intellectual paradigm. It's a debate that touches on the integrity of the scientific process itself and the powerful influence of popular culture on academic thought. Because, let's be real, the public loves the idea of dinosaurs having feathers. It's cool. It's fresh. It's like finding out your great-grandma was a punk rocker. It makes the past exciting. It's the kind of thing that makes a book like Dinosaurs to Dodos so popular. It feeds into the fascination. And this leads us to another wonderfully quirky tidbit from the research. Even the grand, iconic sauropods, those long-necked, plant-eating giants, are still the subject of fierce debate. For a long time, we were pretty sure they held their necks up like a giraffe so they could reach tall trees. But now, some scientists think they actually held their necks out in front of them more like a goose or a swan. It's a minor point, maybe, but it completely changes the mental image you have of a 90-ton animal. You go from picturing it majestically grazing on the highest leaves to seeing it as a kind of enormous quadrupedal vacuum cleaner sweeping up ferns and low-lying plants. It's a little thing, but it's a reminder that we still don't know everything. We're still piecing together the great, beautiful cosmic jigsaw puzzle of life, and we're likely to be debating the details for a very, very long time. So the dinosaur renaissance didn't just change how we see dinosaurs. It changed the very definition of a dinosaur. It turned them from a historical curiosity into a vibrant, living part of our world. It gave us the most powerful, most iconic symbol of extinction in all of human history, a symbol of the epic humbling and cosmic forces that shape life on Earth. A symbol that's about to go head-to-head with a flightless pigeon in the final dramatic act of our story. But first we need to take a step back and look at how the dinosaur became a pop culture icon, because its campaign to win the extinct animal election was not won in a lab. It was won at the box office. You've just wrapped your head around the idea of a dinosaur renaissance, this scientific revolution that turned a bunch of sluggish, tail-dragging beasts into dynamic, warm-blooded dynamos. It's the kind of paradigm shift that makes you look at a garden gnome and wonder if it's secretly a robot. This new vision, filled with vibrant colors and energetic movement, is what brought the dinosaur roaring back into the public imagination. But nestled right in the middle of this renaissance, there's a debate, a scholarly shouting match that still rages on today. It's the fight over the biggest, most mind-bending idea of all that birds are, in fact, dinosaurs. Now, on the surface, this might sound a little bit crazy. The idea that a pigeon is a living theropod, a tiny feathered relative of the Tyrannosaurus rex, is the kind of thing that would have gotten you laughed out of a university lecture hall a few decades ago. But today, it is the mainstream consensus, firmly embedded within the modern view of what dinosaurs are. For most paleontologists, it's not even a question. It's a fact, a beautiful, provable truth that connects the deep, unimaginable past to our noisy, chirping present. The proof, they say, is in the bones. The anatomical similarities, the shared features, the fossil record. It all points to a seamless evolutionary line that runs directly from a small feathered dinosaur to the birds we see flying around every day. It is, for a modern scientist, the ultimate survival story. But as with any good story, there's a villain, or at least a dissenting voice. His name is Alan Fiducia, a prominent paleontologist who for decades has been leading the charge against the birds are dinosaurs theory. He's the guy who looks at a beautifully painted mural of a feathered raptor and says, "Nope, you got it all wrong." He argues that theropod dinosaurs were too specialized for terrestrial ground-based life, and that the sheer elegance and complexity of bird flight could only have evolved in a creature that lived in the trees. He's the guy who thinks the whole birds from theropods idea is what he calls theory-laden, a conclusion that was made to fit a pre-established theory instead of being led by the evidence. He even goes so far as to accuse the mainstream community of practicing a science that is driven by a quest for popularity. He sees a kind of confirmation bias at play where new discoveries are instantly molded to fit the narrative everyone wants to believe. And honestly, you have to give him credit for being the guy who stands up and yells, "Hey, wait a minute," in the middle of the most crowded room in paleontology. It takes a lot of guts. Or maybe a whole lot of stubbornness. It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? The debate isn't just about bones and fossils, of course. It's a meta-discussion about the nature of science itself. Is science a collaborative process where we all work together to build a single, unified theory? Or is it a battle of ideas, a fierce and relentless competition for the truth with intellectual rivalries and academic feuds? I mean, scholars still argue whether Fiducia's critiques are a genuine, well-argued scientific rebuttal or simply the last gasp of a dying intellectual paradigm. It's the kind of scholarly drama that you just can't make up. It's like finding out that your favorite reality TV show is actually a documentary. It's just better. And here's a wonderfully quirky tidbit from the front lines of this debate. In one of his books, Fiducia has a title that is a quiet, scholarly jab at the popularization of the bird-dinosaur link. The book is called Romancing the Birds and Dinosaurs, Forays in Postmodern Paleontology. He's essentially arguing that the obsession with making dinosaurs more avian, and therefore more modern and cool, is a kind of romanticization. It's a subtle, almost academic level of shade-throwing. It's the intellectual equivalent of a passive-aggressive post-it note that says, "I see you've been reinterpreting the fossil record again. Hope it's going well." It's a reminder that even in the stuffiest, most serious corners of academia, there's always a little bit of human emotion at play. And boy, does the public love that. Because this is where the debate really gets interesting. This entire intellectual battle, this back and forth over feathers and bones and family trees, is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a world that is obsessed with dinosaurs. And that obsession was largely forged in the fiery crucible of Hollywood, in a place that has nothing to do with dusty museum halls and everything to do with box office returns. The idea of a fast, agile, bird-like raptor wasn't just a scientific theory. It was a blockbuster movie star. The image of the T-Rex as a terrifying, sprinting predator wasn't just an academic reinterpretation. It was a cinematic icon. The dinosaur renaissance was a gift to a culture that was just waiting for a reason to fall back in love with these magnificent creatures. So while the Dodos campaign was one of quiet, moral introspection, the Dinosaurs campaign was loud, boisterous, and a little bit ridiculous. It wasn't one with elegant theories and meticulous fossil interpretations. It was one at the box office. And it's that very power, that pop culture primacy, that we need to look at next. Because the Dinosaur, by a landslide, won the election for our collective imagination long before the Dodo even had a chance to present its case. And that's a story all its own. You've left the dusty academic debate, the one about the feathered dinosaur and the one about the sauropod's neck posture. You leave the scholarly quarrels and the footnotes and the quiet, intellectual squabbles of men in tweed jackets. And you step not into a different room, but into a different kind of light. A light that flickers and glows and projects images on a giant screen. You've just walked into the multiplex. The air smells like buttered popcorn and a faint, sweet trace of a sugar rush. This is where the Dinosaur really won its election for our hearts and minds. It wasn't in a science paper. It was at the box office. The Dinosaur Renaissance, that brilliant intellectual shift that gave us the idea of dynamic, intelligent, and bird-like dinosaurs, was the perfect storm. It was a scientific revolution, but it was a revolution that was just waiting for a charismatic leader, a hero who could take all this new exciting information and make it a global, screaming, unforgettable event. And that leader was Steven Spielberg. His 1993 film Jurassic Park didn't just change cinema. It changed science communication forever. It took the academic ideas of the dinosaur renaissance, the theories of fast, agile, warm-blooded dinosaurs, and put them on a visceral, terrifying stage. The old, slow, tail-dragging monster of our childhood was gone. In its place was a hunting machine, a predator that could run and think and inspire pure, unadulterated awe. It was the ultimate makeover. It was like taking a frumpy, khaki-clad accountant and turning them into a rock star with a laser light show and $1,000-a-day pyrotechnics budget. The movie, of course, was based on a novel by Michael Crichton, and the story of its creation is a masterclass in how science and entertainment began to blur. The research mentions that Don Dino Lessem, the author of the very book we're holding, was an advisor to the film. And Jan Sovak, the book's illustrator, was so good at his job, so brilliant at breathing life and movement into creatures that have been dead for millions of years, that he was also hired to illustrate a version of the original Jurassic Park novel. This is a wonderfully quirky little tidbit, isn't it? The creators of our unassuming children's encyclopedia were also part of the team that created the biggest blockbuster of the 1990s. They were living, breathing proof that the line between serious science and mass-market entertainment was not just blurred, but almost completely gone. It's the intellectual equivalent of a scientist going on dancing with the stars and winning the whole thing. The film didn't just popularize dinosaurs. It gave them a new wardrobe, a new personality, and a new kind of power. The T-Rex wasn't just a big, scary lizard. It was a character. The velociraptors, with their cunning eyes and their terrifying intelligence, became symbols of a new kind of predator. And the public, armed with this new information, wanted more. They didn't just want to see the movie once. They wanted the books, the toys, the lunchboxes, the theme park rides. The dinosaur became a brand, a colossal, global, multi-billion-dollar brand. The movie, by the way, was so successful that when it was re-released in 2013, it was the first film to surpass $1 billion at the box office. This is the kind of star power that the Dodo, for all its tragic and meaningful history, can't possibly compete with. The Dodo is a ghost story told in a quiet room. The Dinosaur is a stadium tour with a live band and a merch table that wraps around the entire building. And that's what makes the specific artifact at the center of our story, the book Dinosaurs to Dodos, so fascinating. On some retail platforms, it's actually listed as an item in the Jurassic Park series. Now, if you check the official franchise records, you won't find the title there. It's a kind of fascinating intellectual black sheep, a book that's related by spirit, but not by official blood. 3. This is the core of the scholarly debate here. Historians still argue whether this categorization was an intentional official part of the franchise or a clever marketing ploy by booksellers. Either way, it works beautifully for our purposes. It's a powerful symbol of the commercialization of science. The book, in its own way, is a product. And by placing it under the umbrella of the most powerful dinosaur brand in the world, booksellers are leveraging the cultural capital of the blockbuster films to increase the book's visibility and sales. It's like finding out your favorite obscure band is now selling their songs for a car commercial. You're a little bit sad, but you also understand the game. The Dinosaurs' campaign to win the extinct animal election was not a quiet, ethical one. It was loud, it was beautiful, and it was brutal. It was one not with sorrow, but with spectacle. It's a powerful reminder that our fascination with a subject, especially one as grand and as terrifying as a dinosaur, can easily overwhelm the more nuanced, more difficult stories. The Dinosaurs' narrative is one of pure, unadulterated awe. It's a story that is not about our mistakes, but about the overwhelming impersonal power of the universe. It's the story of a cosmic tragedy that happened 100 million years before we even existed. And in the pop culture election, that story wins every single time. It's a comforting, thrilling, and ultimately humbling tale. So where does that leave our sad little Dodo? As we turn the page of our book from the screaming, roaring, cinematic grandeur of the dinosaurs to the more recent, more quiet extinctions, the contrast couldn't be more stark. The Dinosaur has made its case a case built on epic scale and box office returns. The Dodo's case, remember, was a personal one, a whisper of human folly and environmental ruin. Now we're going to look at the election from the other side, the Dodo side. We're going to see how, in its own quiet way, the Dodo still has a powerful argument to make a case that a celebrity dinosaur could never, ever win. You've just been bathed in the glorious, noisy, CGI-fueled light of the pop culture dinosaur. You've seen how this creature, through sheer cinematic spectacle and a brilliant scientific renaissance, won its place in our hearts and minds. It's the ultimate celebrity extinction. It's a rock star, a brand and A-lister that doesn't have to do anything but exist in our imagination to be a global icon. Its campaign platform is simple, epic, cosmic, and totally humbling. A story so big it makes you feel wonderfully small. But now you're turning the page. You're leaving the roar of the multiplex and the thunder of the Mesozoic, and you're coming back to the quiet of the bookstore, to the book that started it all. The book in your hands is a humble thing. It's not a blockbuster. It's an encyclopedia. And as you flip through its pages, you see its central argument, its subtle, profound point. The book's core theme, the quiet fact that it presents over and over again, is this: for every plant or animal species alive on our planet today, more than 1,000 species have already vanished since life first appeared on Earth. It's a sobering fact, a kind of biological whisper that chills you to the bone. It's a reminder that extinction isn't a single tragic event, but a constant ongoing process, a kind of cosmic scale cleanup. This book, Dinosaurs to Dodos, an encyclopedia of extinct animals, is a document of that process. It's not a narrative with a hero and a villain and a classic three-act structure. It's a guide. It's a chronological journey through 4 billion years of life, from the first microscopic sea creatures to the Tasmanian wolf, a more recent loss that many of us can just barely remember. It's structured like a textbook for a very sleepy history class with 12 neatly organized chapters, each one focusing on a different geologic period or epoch. It is, for lack of a better word, professional. It's informative. It's visually striking. And it's the ultimate referee in the great extinct animal election. Because by placing these two creatures, the all-conquering dinosaur and the all-too-human dodo, in a single unified text, it forces you to hold both of their stories in your mind at the exact same time. It's a bit of an intellectual ambush, really. The dinosaur gets to be the big epic opening act, and the dodo gets to be the intimate, sobering closer. It's like a playlist curated by a genius. The book takes you on a journey. It starts with the epic, unimaginable expanse of deep time, with the long, slow, grinding extinctions that happened before mammals were even a twinkle in a reptile's eye. And then it gently, almost imperceptibly, guides you through the eras of the planet's history, showing you how things lived and died and changed until it finally arrives in a kind of terrifyingly quiet present. A present where the biggest threat to life isn't a meteor from outer space, but us. It's an easy-to-follow guide through the geologic timescale, but it's a guide with a very clear destination in mind, a world where extinction is not an abstract concept, but a very real, very human-caused event. And here's a wonderfully quirky tidbit that tells you everything you need to know about the genius of the book's author, Don Dino Lessem. While he's best known for his work with the world's biggest, most terrifying dinosaurs, he led the construction of the largest ever anatomically correct dinosaur skeleton, a 120-foot Argentinosaurus. He also wrote a wonderfully strange book called Death by Roller Disco. Yes, Death by Roller Disco. He's the kind of guy who can make the most profound and epic subjects accessible and fun, but he's also got this delightfully bizarre, irreverent streak. He's like that one professor you had in college who was a world-class expert on Renaissance art, but also had a side gig doing stand-up comedy at a local dive bar. This unique blend of expertise and personality is what makes the book so much more than a simple reference work. It's a work of science communication, but it's done with a twinkle in its eye. And that brings us to our open, scholarly debate. As we learned in the last section, some retail sites like Better World Books list Dinosaurs to Dodos as an item in the Jurassic Park series. And scholars still argue whether this was an official part of the franchise or a clever marketing ploy to leverage the brand's name recognition. There's no official record of this book being part of the franchise, but it's a brilliant move, isn't it? It connects the quiet academic study of extinction to the loud screaming spectacle of a Hollywood blockbuster. It's the ultimate metaphor for how scientific information is disseminated in the modern era. You can write a meticulously researched book, but what gets it into the hands of the public is a brand. It's a great example of how science and entertainment are no longer in two separate worlds. They're roommates, and they probably share a Netflix account. Ultimately, this little book, this guide through 4 billion years of life, is the most important piece of our whole story. It is the silent, impartial jury that sits and listens to both sides of the extinct animal election. It holds the cosmic, humbling narrative of the dinosaurs and the intimate, sobering narrative of the dodo side by side. It forces you to compare them, to weigh their arguments, and to come to your own conclusion. So let's do that. We've already seen the dinosaur's celebrity, its grand cosmic argument. Now it's time to revisit the dodo. We've had a quick look at its quiet, sad story, but now we're going to get to the heart of its campaign. The dodo is ready to make its final argument. It's going to tell us a story about humanity's role in a kind of quiet apocalypse. It's going to make its case for why a humble, flightless pigeon is a more powerful symbol of extinction than all the terrible reptiles combined. You've just been introduced to the grand silent stage of our extinct animal election, a little hardcover encyclopedia for kids. A book that with a kind of subtle brilliance forces you to hold the humbling, cosmic narrative of the dinosaur and the heartbreaking, human-caused story of the dodo in your mind at the very same time. But a stage, no matter how perfectly set, needs a director and a cast. And this book, this little manual on extinction, was created by two absolute masters of their craft. Two men who understood the complex, messy, and wonderfully bizarre intersection of serious science and popular culture. Their names, remember, are Don Lessem and Jan Sovak. Think of them as the co-directors of this strange and epic play. Their backgrounds are not what you would expect from two men who dedicated their professional lives to extinct animals. For years, Don Dino Lessem was a science journalist, not a paleontologist. He spent over a decade writing for prestigious publications like the Boston Globe and the New York Times. He has a master's degree in animal behavior, which is a perfect background for someone who would later write about dinosaurs, but it's a very different path from the typical academic who spends their life in a lab or on a dig site. Lessem is an interpreter, a translator. He's the guy who can take a dry, dense scientific paper about a fossil and turn it into a story so compelling that it makes you feel like you're right there standing in the dust watching a 30-ton sauropod walk by. His genius, his real superpower, is popularization. He's a master at it. He was a consultant for the movie Jurassic Park, a television and radio commentator on paleontology, and he even created some of the largest international traveling dinosaur exhibitions. This is a man who knows how to make science exciting, how to make it sell. He's so good at it, in fact, that the sauropodomorph dinosaur Lessemsaurus was named after him. Imagine that. A dinosaur is named after a guy who popularized dinosaurs. It's like a dessert being named after the guy who invented the first recipe for chocolate chip cookies. It's the ultimate professional honor. And here's a wonderfully quirky tidbit that tells you everything you need to know about the man himself. The same guy who was so respected in the world of paleontology that a dinosaur was named after him also wrote a book called Death by Roller Disco. Yes, Death by Roller Disco. He's a man with a sense of humor as vast and bizarre as the subject he writes about. He's also reportedly designing a mobile Trump museum of crime to tour U.S. cities. It's a completely baffling, strange, and irreverent piece of information, but it tells you that Lessem is not a stuffy academic. He is a master of the off-kilter, the unexpected, and the slightly ridiculous. He's the perfect person to take two of the world's most iconic extinct animals and put them in an election. He gets it. He gets that science and entertainment are two sides of the same coin. And then there's his collaborator, Jan Sovak, the book's illustrator. Sovak is an award-winning nature artist whose work has been described as brilliantly executed. He's the one who gave the book its visual language, who breathed life and movement into the creatures that Lessem was writing about. He works directly from fossils and the latest scientific theories to create his art, which means the images in the book aren't just pretty pictures. They're meticulously researched, scientifically accurate portraits. They're the real deal. But here's the thing, Sovak also illustrated a version of the original Jurassic Park novel written by Michael Crichton. So you see, both of the creators of this quiet, unassuming children's book were also deeply embedded in the cinematic blockbuster world of the modern dinosaur. They're the perfect creative team for this project, a team that exists at the crucial, fascinating intersection of serious science and mass-market entertainment. They're not just narrating the debate between the dodo and the dinosaur. They helped set the stage for it. And this brings us back to that one lingering mystery we've talked about before. The fact that on some retail platforms, our book, Dinosaurs to Dodos, is listed as an item in the Jurassic Park series. Now, historians still argue whether this was an intentional official part of the franchise or a clever marketing ploy by booksellers. There's no official record of the book in the franchise's list of official novels or publications. It's a great example of the very thing we're discussing. The book's subject matter, extinct animals, particularly dinosaurs, aligns it perfectly with the franchise. By placing it under the Jurassic Park brand, booksellers are leveraging the massive cultural capital of the films to increase its visibility and sales. It is a powerful, almost subconscious act of persuasion. It tells you that even if you don't think you're interested in a children's encyclopedia on extinct animals, you might be interested in a book that's associated with the biggest dinosaur movie of all time. It's the ultimate marketing move. It's a great example of how, in the modern era, scientific information is so often disseminated and consumed with a little bit of help from its friend Hollywood. Ultimately, this book and its creators, knowingly or not, laid the groundwork for the profound intellectual and cultural discourse that you're now a part of. The book itself is the ballot box, and the creators are the poll workers. They're the ones who brought the two most powerful icons of extinction to the same stage, the ones who gave them a voice and a purpose, and the ones who let you, the reader, decide who truly wins the extinct animal election. And as we go forward, we'll start to see just how each of these two magnificent creatures, the dodo and the dinosaur, makes its final winning argument. You're holding that book, that quiet little encyclopedia for kids, and you just learned that its two creators, Don Lessem and Jan Sovak, were also deeply embedded in the grand, roaring blockbuster spectacle that was Jurassic Park. You've been introduced to Lessem, a man so brilliant at popularizing science that they named a dinosaur after him. And you've met Sovak, an artist who could take a fossil and breathe life back into it with a few strokes of his pencil. The connection between the book and the movie is almost poetic. It feels like a beautiful full-circle moment where the educational and the entertaining finally merge into one seamless, glorious experience. But here's the thing. It's a little more complicated than that. Because as we've seen, the book is listed on some retail sites as an item in the Jurassic Park series. And if you're a fan of those films, you probably don't think anything of it. You see a book about dinosaurs and extinct animals. You see a mention of the most famous dinosaur franchise in the world, and you think, oh, cool, this is part of the story. But here is the magnificent paradox. The book is not, and has never been, an official part of the Jurassic Park franchise. If you check the official lists of novels, those written by Michael Crichton, and the subsequent ones, you won't find this title anywhere on it. The book is an intellectual black sheep, a kind of lovable misfit that's part of the family by choice but not by blood. And this is where the real drama unfolds. This isn't just a simple error in categorization. It's a calculated, subtle, and incredibly effective marketing strategy. Think about it. This book is a meticulously researched, carefully illustrated, educational encyclopedia. It's a work of juvenile nonfiction, a genre that is not exactly known for its explosive, box office breaking sales figures. But the moment you tag it with the name Jurassic Park, it's a game changer. You are no longer selling a book about extinct animals. You are selling a piece of a global brand, a brand that is synonymous with awe-adventure and the terrifying majesty of dinosaurs. It's like selling a biography of a quiet, scholarly genius by putting it under the label of your favorite action movie. It's a way to leverage the commercial power and the cultural capital of a blockbuster to sell a much more sober, much more educational product. The fact that this book is associated even unofficially with the Jurassic Park brand is a testament to the immense power of the pop culture dinosaur. Its campaign to win the extinct animal election was not won on the merits of its sad demise. It was won at the box office, on the television screen, in the toy aisle, and now on the digital retail shelves of the internet. The dinosaur is not just a scientific subject. It's a global icon. It's a celebrity. And its story is told not with a whisper, but with a roar. This is the great paradox. This quiet, unassuming book for children, with its serious scientific overviews and its chronological guide through the geologic timescale, has to borrow the star power of the very thing it's meant to educate you about. 5. It's a reminder that in the modern era, science and entertainment are no longer two separate worlds. They're roommates, and they probably share a Netflix account. There's a scholarly debate to be had here, of course. Historians still argue whether the bookseller's categorization was an intentional official part of the franchise or a clever marketing ploy to leverage the brand's name recognition. The evidence, of course, points to the latter. The book is a kind of brilliant passive-aggressive move. It's a way of saying, you came here for the cinematic spectacle, but I'm going to give you a lesson in real science. And the most wonderfully quirky tidbit of all, Don Lessem, the author of this book, a man who has made a career out of explaining science, is also the same man who wrote a book called Death by Roller Disco, and he's reportedly designing a mobile Trump Museum of Crime to tour U.S. cities. He's a walking, talking, perfectly absurd representation of this very paradox. He is a man who can be a serious academic and a brilliantly irreverent satirist at the same time. He is the perfect person to be at the center of this strange, beautiful, and hilarious intellectual debate. He gets it. He gets that you have to be a little bit funny, a little bit weird, and a little bit surprising to get people to pay attention to a subject as grand and as serious as extinction. The dinosaur, with its star power and its cosmic narrative, has made its case. Its campaign was loud, beautiful, and brutal. Its story is the ultimate survival story, one of an epic, world-ending event that happened long before we were here. But now, as you close this section and prepare to turn the page, we're going back to the other candidate. We're going back to the dodo. The dodo's story is the opposite of the dinosaurs. It's not a story about a cosmic event. It's a story about human folly. It's a story about a quiet, beautiful tragedy that happened in the span of a single human lifetime. It's a story that has a more profound and perhaps more terrifying message for us today. The dodo is ready to make its final argument. It's ready to tell you why its quiet, heartbreaking demise is a more powerful symbol of extinction than all the terrible reptiles combined. We've seen the dinosaurs campaign. It's loud, it's grand, it's cosmic. Its entire argument for being the ultimate symbol of extinction is based on scale. 165 million year reign ended by a single, terrifying act of God-level violence. It's a tragedy that happened so long ago and on such a magnificent scale that it feels more like a science fiction movie than a part of our own history. The dinosaur is a rock star, a celebrity, a brand. Its story is a comforting, humbling reminder that some things are just bigger than us. But now it's time to listen to the other candidate. It's time to turn back to the quiet, dignified, and heartbreaking case of the dodo. The Dodos campaign platform is the opposite of the dinosaurs. It doesn't need a cosmic impact or 100 million years of rule. It needs just a few dozen sailors, a couple of rats, and a little bit of human carelessness. The dodo in this election is not the grand impersonal force of nature. It's a mirror. It's a reflection of our own hubris. The dodo's tragic story, a story we once told ourselves was about a creature too stupid to live, is now a profound and terrifying allegory for our modern environmental crisis. It is the ultimate cautionary tale, and its campaign slogan is simple and direct: I was you. Remember how astonishingly fast the dodo's extinction was. The first recorded sighting of this bird was in 1598, and the last widely accepted sighting was just 64 years later in 1662. A species living and thriving for millions of years in its isolated paradise was completely wiped from the face of the earth in the span of a single human lifetime. Think about that. You could have been a little boy in 1598, seen a dodo on its native island of Mauritius, and then lived a full life grown old. And on your deathbed, you would have heard that the last of the dodos were gone. This wasn't some slow geological process. It was a kind of quiet, horrifying apocalypse that happened in real time. And what caused it? Not a giant asteroid, not a massive volcanic eruption, but a combination of human-driven factors hunting to the introduction of invasive species like rats and dogs that preyed on its eggs and young, and the destruction of its native Mauritian forest habitat. The dodo was an evolutionary genius, a creature perfectly adapted to its predator-free island world. And then we showed up, and we brought our baggage with us. We brought our rats, our dogs, our need for timber and farmland. And because the dodo hadn't evolved to be afraid of us, because it was, in a very real way, the most innocent creature on the planet, it just disappeared. Its extinction, as the research points out, is one of the most well-known examples of human-induced extinction and disastrous environmental impact. The genius of the dodo's campaign lies in its emotional immediacy. You can look at a dinosaur fossil and feel a kind of detached awe, like looking at an ancient statue in a museum. But you can't look at the dodo's story without a shiver of recognition. It's too close. The dodo is not a symbol of cosmic inevitability. It's a symbol of human culpability. Its disappearance serves as a kind of moral mirror, a reflection of our own power and our own carelessness. The dodo's ghost is a kind of historical credit card debt we keep having to pay off. Its story reminds us that we are not just observers of the world. We are active, destructive, and often very stupid participants. The dodo's campaign is also more complex than the dinosaurs. It's not a one-note song of tragedy. It is a story with a quiet, scholarly debate at its heart. For a long time, the dodo was considered a mythological beast. It was so completely and utterly gone so fast that many people, even in the 19th century, thought that the stories of it were nothing but tall tales from overeager sailors. Scholars still argue whether this was a simple mistake or a kind of collective amnesia, a way of psychologically processing a disappearance that had no precedent in history. The dodo was in a way too real to be real. It was a tangible, living, breathing proof of our destructive power, and for a long time, it was easier to pretend that it had never existed at all. And here's a wonderfully quirky tidbit that brings the Dodo story into our modern era. The Dodo's disappearance was so fast and so complete that for a long time scientists didn't even know what it was. Early scientists declared it a kind of small ostrich, a rail, or even a vulture. Imagine that for a second. The ultimate symbol of extinction, the creature that gave us the phrase dead as a dodo, was a kind of scientific mystery for centuries. It was only when a Danish zoologist, Johannes Theodor Reinhardt, finally proposed that the dodo was a ground pigeon that the scientific community started to piece together the truth. And in 2016, with the successful sequencing of the dodo's genome, a new debate was launched, one that is still raging today. This is our open scholarly debate. Scientists still debate whether we have the ethical right to bring a species back from the dead, and if so, should we? The dodo's potential de-extinction has led to a profound and complex discussion about our role as a species. The dinosaur's extinction is a lesson in deep time. The dodo's potential resurrection is a test of our character. Do we have the right to play God? And if we did, what would we do with the dodo? Put it in a zoo. Release it back into a habitat that is now home to a bunch of other animals that would love to eat it and its young. It is the kind of moral quandary that makes the whole extinction conversation much more personal and much more relevant. The dodo wins the extinct animal election for a very simple reason. Its story is a human story. The dinosaur is the big, loud summer blockbuster, a story about a 100-million-year-old cosmic catastrophe that you can watch from a safe distance. The dodo, on the other hand, is the quiet, heartbreaking indie film that gets nominated for an Oscar. A film that's about your own life, your own choices, and the subtle, horrifying ways that you, with every decision you make, are altering the world around you. The dodo's story is a profound act of self-reflection. It's a mirror that shows us what we are capable of and what we have already done. And that, in the end, is a much more powerful and much more terrifying message than anything the biggest, loudest, most magnificent dinosaur could ever possibly offer. But we're not done yet. We've seen both sides of the coin. Now it's time to bring them both back to the stage for a final winning argument. You've listened to the Dodo's campaign. It's a compelling, deeply human story. It's about a quiet, unassuming bird, a species that was a masterpiece of evolutionary specialization, perfectly adapted to its world, until we showed up and changed everything. The dodo's final argument, the one it makes with a sad tilt of its head and a little sigh, is this: its extinction is a mirror that shows us our own power, our own hubris, and the long, slow, horrifying shadow of our own environmental recklessness. The dodo's campaign for symbolic primacy is about culpability. It's a vote for guilt. And it's a terrifyingly persuasive argument. But now you're turning back to the dinosaur. You're looking at its campaign poster. And it's not a photograph of a sad, flightless bird. It's an epic, magnificent mural of fire rock and 100 million years of silent, unquestioned dominance. The dinosaur's campaign is built on a single powerful and humbling idea scale. You've heard this before, but you're going to hear it again, and you're going to feel it a little differently this time. You see, the dinosaur's victory in the extinct animal election has nothing to do with its celebrity. Its victory is in its profound, disarming, and ultimately comforting lesson about deep time. The dodo story is about the last few hundred years. It's a tragedy that happened in your great-great-great-great-grandparents' time. The dinosaur story is one that happened in a time that is so far removed from your reality that it feels more like a fantasy than a fact. Let's try a little thought experiment. Imagine all of Earth's history, all 4.5 billion years of it, as a single, long day. You, your life, your great-grandparents, the Roman Empire, the Egyptians, even the first cave paintings, all of human history would be a single silent blink just before midnight. In this same day, the reign of the dinosaurs, a reign that lasted for 165 million years, would be a full, magnificent afternoon. From breakfast until dinner, they ruled this planet. They saw continents drift apart, mountains rise and fall, and global climates shift. And then, in a terrifying, silent fraction of a second, it all came to a violent end. And that end, my friend, is the heart of the dinosaur's final argument. While the Dodo's extinction was a kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts, a result of hunting habitat loss and the quiet, relentless chaos of invasive species, the dinosaur's extinction was a planetary punch to the face. The leading theory, the one that's become a part of our collective consciousness, is that a giant asteroid, roughly 6 miles wide, came hurtling out of the blackness of space and slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was a planet-killing event. It caused a global winter, plunged the world into darkness, and effectively reset the clock on life itself. Their story isn't a cautionary tale about what happens when you're not careful. It's a humbling, sobering reminder of what happens when the universe decides it's time for a change. It's an extinction that is completely, beautifully, and terrifyingly out of our hands. The dinosaur's message is one of cosmic inevitability. It's a story that says, look, a lot of things can go wrong. Some of them are your fault, but some of them are just the universe. And in a world where we are constantly burdened by the weight of our own mistakes, where we have to worry about climate change and deforestation and the extinction of so many other species, the dinosaur story is a kind of gentle, silent, ASMR-like comfort. It reminds you that we are not, in fact, the only force on this planet. Some tragedies are far, far bigger than our hands could ever be. Some scholars still argue whether the asteroid impact was the sole cause of the dinosaur's demise, or if it was simply the final blow in a long, slow decline that was also influenced by factors like volcanic activity and a shifting climate. This open, scholarly debate is a reminder that even the biggest, most spectacular stories are still a messy human work in progress. But for our purposes, for the symbolic election, the asteroid is the star. It's the grand theatrical moment that cements the dinosaur's place as the ultimate icon of a non-human-caused apocalypse. Here's a wonderfully quirky tidbit that speaks to the core of the dinosaur's argument. Remember Sir Richard Owen, the brilliant, controversial figure who first coined the word dinosauria? He was an outspoken critic of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. He wasn't against the idea of evolution itself, but he believed it was a far more complex, layered process than what Darwin had outlined. He saw the dinosaurs not as simple, evolutionary dead ends, but as a completely distinct, magnificent, and perfect group of creatures. He believed they were part of a kind of perfect plan, a pre-existing blueprint. The man who named them, the man who gave them their very identity, saw their magnificent reign and their tragic end not as a failure, but as a profound cosmic event. And that's a belief that has resonated in some strange subconscious way with the public ever since. The dinosaur's narrative is one of pure, unadulterated awe. It's a story that is not about our mistakes, but about the overwhelming impersonal power of the universe. It's the story of a cosmic tragedy that happened 100 million years before we even existed. And in the pop culture election, that story wins every single time. It's a comforting, thrilling, and ultimately humbling tale. When you think of the grand story of extinction, the one that makes your jaw drop and your eyes widen, you don't think of a sad, flightless pigeon. You think of a screaming, roaring, majestic beast that was killed by an act of God-level violence. You think of the dinosaur. The dinosaur wins the election because its story is more spectacular, more humbling, and more epic than anything the dodo could ever possibly offer. It's not a story about us. It's a story about everything else. The dinosaur, in its terrifying magnificence, wins the election for humbling us with the sheer scale of the universe. Its story is the ultimate survival story. Not for itself, of course, but for its living, breathing, feathered relatives. The ones we see every day pecking at the ground in our backyards. And that, in a way, is a more powerful ending than anything the dodo could ever dream of. A story of a species that didn't just survive, but thrived and lives on disguised in plain sight, as a constant chirping reminder of the magnificent, terrifying, and utterly epic story of life on Earth. But before we get to the end, we're going to bring it all back together. We're going to bring the dodo and the dinosaur to the same stage for a final time. We're going to see how, in a strange, beautiful, and profound way, they need each other. You've heard both sides. You've listened to the dodo's campaign, a quiet, heartbreaking plea for human accountability, a story of a beautiful, flightless pigeon who died for our sins. And you've listened to the dinosaur's campaign, a magnificent, roaring epic of cosmic inevitability, a story of a dynasty wiped out by a single, beautiful, terrifying act of God-level violence. And now you're standing at the ballot box. You're looking at these two candidates, the dodo and the dinosaur, and you realize that you can't choose just one. You can't declare a single winner. Because the entire point of the book, you're holding the entire brilliant premise of your own fabricated title, is that the election is a trick. The debate isn't about choosing the better story. It's about understanding that you need both of them to have the complete picture. The dodo and the dinosaur are not in a debate. They are in a conversation. And that conversation is a single unified fable for today. The dinosaur's story gives you perspective. It's a grand, humbling, and ultimately comforting tale. It whispers to you, don't worry so much. The universe is much, much bigger than you are. Some things are just out of your hands. It's a story that reminds you that extinction is a natural part of life on Earth. 100 million years before you were here, a family of magnificent creatures ruled the planet. And then, through no fault of their own, they were gone. The dinosaur story is a kind of gentle, silent, ASMR-like comfort. It reminds you that some tragedies are far, far bigger than our hands could ever be. You can stare at the magnificent fossil of a Tyrannosaurus rex in a museum and feel a kind of detached awe, the same kind of feeling you get when you look at a galaxy through a telescope. It's a feeling of smallness, of insignificance, but it's a good kind of insignificant. It takes the weight off your shoulders. But then you turn back to the dodo, and its story doesn't give you comfort. It gives you a kind of quiet, horrified dread. It's a story about a tragedy that wasn't an act of God. It was an act of us. The dodo story says, hey, this one was on you. Its extinction, an astonishingly fast and brutal event, was a result of a combination of human-driven factors, hunting the introduction of invasive species, and the destruction of its native habitat. The dodo is not a monument to deep time. It's a moral mirror. Its story holds you accountable. It tells you that every action, no matter how small, has a consequence. It is a terrifying and profound cautionary tale, a vote for guilt and a direct reminder that we are not just observers of the world. We are active, destructive, and often very stupid participants. So the genius of the book, Dinosaurs to Dodos, is in its juxtaposition. It forces you to hold both of these truths in your mind at the same time. You need the dinosaur to give you a sense of perspective on deep time, to feel humbled by the scale of the universe. But you need the dodo to give you a sense of purpose, to feel a sense of urgency about your own small, precious, and fragile moment in history. The dinosaur teaches you about the grand cosmic end. The dodo teaches you about the human-caused beginning. The election isn't about choosing the best story. It's about realizing that the stories are one and the same. The ultimate lesson of extinction is that it is a multi-layered story of both human-made tragedies and grand cosmic events. And that's the beautiful final and the most profound lesson of all. The dinosaur story, as it turns out, is the ultimate survival story. Not for itself, of course, but for its living, breathing, feathered relatives. The ones we see every day, pecking at the ground in our backyards, are all living reminders of a dynasty that didn't just die out. It evolved. It's a story that says even when everything goes wrong, something beautiful can still survive. And the dodo story, for all its heartbreaking tragedy, has a similar kind of quiet hope. Because with the sequencing of its genome in 2016, the dodo story went from a sad, historical footnote to a profound ethical debate about the future. It's a story that now asks us, if you could fix a mistake you made, would you? It's a test of our character, a final, quiet challenge from a bird that was once considered too stupid to live. The book, in its own silent way, is a fable for today. It's a guide through the geologic timescale that starts with the incomprehensible grandeur of the dinosaur and ends with the terrifying intimacy of the dodo. And by doing so, it forces you to reconcile two of the most powerful conflicting ideas in all of science. It's a testament to the power of a book to do far more than just inform. It can make you think. It can make you feel. It can make you look at the world and your place in it with a new set of eyes. It can take two of the most famous extinct creatures of all time and put them in a debate that for a few hours feels as real and as vital as anything you've ever seen. And now you know what it means. The debate is over. The election is won. But it's not won by one of them. It's won by both. It's won by us. Because the story of extinction is not about death. It is about how the living go on armed with a new kind of knowledge, a new kind of purpose, and a deeper, more profound sense of their own place in the long, strange, and beautiful story of life on Earth. The dodo and the dinosaur, forever linked in this strange and wonderful book, are the perfect bookends for a story that is not about an end, but a beginning. The debate is over. The election is won. The lights are dimming now, the music is fading, and the ghosts of our past are settling back into the quiet of the shadows. The T-Rex no longer roaring is just a memory, a magnificent creature of bone and stone, a symbol of a time before we were here. And the dodo, once so maligned and misunderstood, is just a quiet whisper in the wind, a reminder of a lesson we are still learning. The book is closed. The stories are done. And all that's left is the quiet. The gentle, silent, calming quiet. Take a deep breath, a long, slow breath. The sound of the wind is whispering now, just a soft rush in your ears. The stars are coming out one by one, and the world is still here. The world is still here, full of quiet lessons and grand epic stories waiting for you to find them. Sweet dreams.